Hi, everybody. We hope everybody had a great Valentine's Day and that you are all staying safe and warm in today's snowstorm.
It's not
Um,
just here in New England. It's this weather pattern that is affecting most of us in the east, and then it's going to be followed by an Arctic blast. So we hope you stay warm too after this.
so for some updates, I am taking an Italian class with my mother through Portland Adult Education, and the class is going well. Let me give you a sample of something that I'm working on for Italian. Um, Amo guarda friends e Gilmore Girls. Ama Rory Gilmore perché ella ama Lagare. Ama Lane Kim e Phoebe Buffet perché musica el sono musicata Phoebe giocare un chitarra e Lane giocare la batteria.
Okay, Gene, that's a good example to start. Now, we also wanted to let you
Can I
know.
tell you what that can we that means? I love watching Friends and Gilmore Girls. I love Rory Gilmore because she likes to read. I love Phoebe Buffet, Lane Kim because they are musicians. Phoebe plays the guitar and Lane plays the drums.
And I want to tell you all that Thursday evening, Gene and I attended a special screening of Patrice the movie. It was at this place on Congress Street called Space, and it was an event sponsored by the folks at DoubleTree House Arts, where Gene and I take our arts class.
It was co-hosted with Double House Arts, Space Gallery, and the art department, and we also got to do a Q&A after the movie with Patrice and her partner Gary, which was very cool. They were very nice.
Now,
So
the movie was really a mini documentary series that you can find on Disney Plus and Hulu. It's about this woman named Patrice who lives in New Jersey, and she has found a nice person in her life called named Gary. But the problem is both of them have disabilities physically, and if they were able to move in together, that would not be allowed with government rules. So they were doing their best to make sure that this legal marriage right would go in place based on their trip to Washington, D.C.
as you can see, my shirt says "Eliminate Marriage Penalty,"
And these
and
both came in,
we both got these shirts when we were at the movie premiere. Um,
and they were either long sleeve t shirts or short sleeve.
um, the last night we were supposed to go to a Broadway rave, which was like a dance that had a Broadway music DJ at it, but
But
it
that's
got
postponed to a later date because of the weather.
the next thing that we wanted to talk about was our January topic for philosophy group at our meeting last month. We talked about a couple of books that dealt with philosophical topics. One book was about alien abductions, and the next book was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, which is about a woman who is suicidal, and she basically goes through a series of situations where if she could do things in her life over again, how would she do things differently? And it kind of reminds me of It's a Wonderful Life, although this character doesn't get to see what things would be like if she had never been born. My favorite section in this book is um when she's like a public speaker at a event about um delivering um I guess she was delivering a speech about how to be successful. And I mean, I think she gives the audience members really good advice. What did you gain out of the discussion we had in philosophy group last month?
In philosophy group, we were visiting our friend, what was his name?
Josh.
Josh's house in Portland. And all of us got together to talk about the premise of what it would be like if we were into another place or we could change something in our lives. I had a number of things in our minds, and Jean did too. And it was good for us to really understand that even though those events are irreversible, we can still learn something from that. And it really makes us feel kind of special inside.
So, our next philosophy club meeting is going to be on Saturday, and we're having our friends over to have a discussion and then watch the movie Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio. And the discussion we're going to have based around the movie is about dreams, and we are contrasting the ending um, of the movie um, to the end of the movie A Walk to Remember, to see how we would rewrite the ending differently if we were the screenwriters. And we are also going to talk about the movie Numb starring Matthew Perry, and we are going to talk about coping mechanisms for anxiety.
So, one of the books that we buddy read that's in our pile here is from Sarah Adams.
So last month we had the honor of going to Books a Million down in South Portland over by the mall, and we got to meet Sarah Adams. She was very nice, and she answered a lot of good questions. And this fictional town of Rome, Kentucky, she confirmed is based off of Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls. Um, so her recent book, Beg, Borrow, or Steal, focuses around two second grade teachers, Emily, who is one of the sisters of the main character from the first book in the series, Noah, and Jack. And I did you like the dynamic between Jack and Emily?
Well, for much of the book at first, it was like that they were still bickering with each other after Jack had that incident when they went to college. However, as the story progressed, their love started to fall through more and more. And finally, they realized at the very end, when Emily's sister was doing her business, then that was part of the nice ending, and as well as Emily and Jack being a great couple.
This series gets a 4.5 star from me. This book gets 4 stars. The first book, When in Rome, gets 4 stars, and the second book, Practice Makes Perfect, gets 5 stars. My favorite thing about Practice Makes Perfect is the dynamic between Will and Annie, and how Will kind of teaches um Annie to be better in relationships. Will kind of reminds me of Joey from Friends in a way that he's like really into women and he's kind of a ladies' man. Um, the next book we wanted to talk about that we buddy read for the past couple of weeks is Dreams to Dust. This was the book that Matt got at the swap at our family Christmas party in December, and it is a historical fiction book that is set during the Dust Bowl in the early 1900s in Oklahoma.
And that was before Oklahoma was declared the nation's 46th state. So in this book, it's about a person in the South named Creed McReynolds. And during the way, he has some all kinds of ambitions in that what you would say I think would be the saloon or old west days to really build a town. And when it looks like at the very end he finds his way with all the lumber and stuff, then they fade away as fast as it almost had started. And he thought it was going to be nothing else mattered at the very end. until he went on the train and then found his best friends.
I really like the setting of this book, and I enjoyed the development of the main character planning the town, because I don't really know a lot about how towns are formed and how things are built. So I thought that was really interesting. What did you like about this book?
That was part of it, but I also like how when people were out in the old days when they were looking at the stars up in the sky at night, plus how they were managing to be together,
Mm-hmm.
living on foods like cornbread and beans and what you could think of down south.
The next book that we wanted to talk about was The Frozen Queen duology by Greta Kelly, which is a series of two fantasy books. What time period would you say these books were set in?
Well, I think it's a two-part series on this Frozen trilogy. It's about this princess named Askia, and she's coming from the north. And then in the two books, it really transpires how she ends up being the emperor of her religion with battle and war, and her being a witch. So it's really those older days, even before I think the Renaissance or maybe even the Vikings.
The final book that we wanted to talk about is You Never Know, which is Tom Selleck's memoir. We both read this last month, and I have read it previously when it was first released in May of last year. So, in this book, Tom Selleck does not really talk too much about playing Richard on Friends. He mostly talks about the movie he was in the 1980s, Three Men and a Baby, which is coming out with a sequel this spring, which I'm excited to see, and Magnum PI, which we watched season 4 of all of last year, and we really enjoyed Magnum PI. What did you think of Tom Selleck's memoir?
Well, Tom really comes out with a good topic about how he transitioned into being a kind of below average student, especially when he was playing basketball, into the actor that he was signed up from Fox to Universal. And especially how at first he didn't want to play Magnum, but it became a really successful hit of the 1980s. So there was a lot I found out about him, and that's why it's called You Never Know. And as of right now, Tom Selleck recently turned 80 years old. So that's a good way to know that he's had a good life all the way.
Another memoir by a Friends actor that I'm currently listening to on audiobook is Brooke Shields is Not Too Old. Um, and this was a recently new release that came out in the middle of January, and I really like the advice that that Brooke Shields gives about body image and confidence. I think as somebody who struggled with confidence throughout my teenage years and early adulthood, I think that her advice is very crucial to me, and I really appreciate what she says in her book. So I am halfway through the audiobook of Brooke Shields' memoir, and I would say that I would give it 4.5 stars. How would you rate Tom Selleck's memoir?
Tom Selleck, I would say 4.5 stars out of 5.
And what about Frozen Queen?
What they really are is first of all, it's called The Frozen Crown, and then the second one is The Seventh Queen.
Oh,
And
sorry.
both of those books, I would give them 4.5 stars out of 5 because it's very epic and really emotional.
Um, and then what about Big Borrow or Steal?
Beg, Borrow, Steal. Sarah Adams does a good job. 4.5 stars out of 5.
I gave it 3.75 to 4 stars. So the next thing we wanted to talk about was fan theories for Encanto. The first fan theory we wanted to talk about is Pedro is the casita. This theory is basically based in speculation that the the spirit of Mirabelle's dead grandfather is within the walls and the foundation of the house that they live in. And I really think this is true because the only two people that can communicate with the house are Abuela and Mirabel. And I just love that the house is so interactive. I think that would make a really cool like exhibit. I know that Disney World is going to be opening an Encanto section of Epcot next year, so
Mhm.
I can't wait to see what that's like.
So,
Oh, go
so
ahead.
the other theory is going to be Dolores is the villain. That what what Matt Pack thinks about that. But and I would agree too with what he thinks about that theory because Dolores in the movie has those emotions that really make her feel like she's not as happy or easygoing as the other family members of the Madrigal. So it really makes sense of why she would be worried about everything that happens. Don't you
she's
think so?
she's also jealous of her cousin Isabella and her relationship with Mariano, which is the reason why she tries to get herself in the middle of that and tries to break them up.
Right.
I would definitely agree with Matt Pat too that Dolores is the villain of Encanto, even though technically the movie doesn't really have a villain that's noted in the list of characters. The next thing we wanted to talk about is Wishbone. I watched the show growing up, and I was recently inspired to rewatch it because of a Book Olive series where she read the books that were mentioned in Wishbone and then watched the episodes and did a comparison to the books and how the episodes of Wishbone interpreted them. The two episodes that we watched were Paw Prince of Thieves and um Hot Diggity Dog, which were correlated to Robin Hood and Journey of the Center of the Earth. What did you think of these?
Well, Wishbone really had a good sense of imagination with his mind, even though he was a middle sized dog, a Jack Russell Terrier. But anyway, based on what I was seeing in Journey to the Center of the Earth and how he was digging the hole during this episode, really made him aware of the hidden treasures that were found. And then in Robin Hood, it's funny how we know about the story, about how he would play a role for Robin Hood, since I haven't really watched much in me about Robin Hood myself.
And I haven't seen the animated version of Robin Hood in a long time. I liked both of these episodes of Wishbone. I thought they were really good. And it's really good to be reconnected with these series again. So I thank Olive for reintroducing me to watching Wishbone because I haven't watched it since I was a kid. The next thing I wanted to talk about is book to TV show comparisons. So Lucy Foley's book, The Hunting Party, was recently adapted to a TV show that was on NBC at the beginning of this month. And I read the book at the very end of January to prepare for the premiere of the TV show. I have to say, so this book is a thriller that takes place at a hunting lodge, and that whole aspect of the plot seemed to be taken out of the TV show, and it was more of a crime model crime show that was focused on tracking down a serial killer. So I really think that the TV show kind of ruined the book. I gave the book four eight five 4.5 out of 5 on Goodreads, and I gave the TV show 4 out of 10 on IMDb. The next thing we are talking about today is our director focus on James Burrows, and we are comparing and contrasting the pilot episodes of Cheers, Friends, and Will and Grace. So I have been rewatching Friends since 2023 when I first um, read Matthew Perry's memoir, and this is my first time rewatching Will and Grace since it was originally on TV in the 1990s, and I have never seen Cheers before, so this show is totally new to me.
Well,
Um,
Cheers was the one that James Burrows came up with first, and it was based on the idea that he and other staff members of the show were finding out about the location based on a trip to Boston's pub. And now that iconic pub is right on Beacon Street in Boston.
And we are planning to eventually go there sometime in the spring. Um, so with the pilot episodes of Friends, we're all familiar with this pilot. It's the one where they're all sitting in Central Perk and Monica is lamenting to the rest of her friends about the dating life. Ross is lamenting about breaking up with Carol. Rachel comes onto the scene in her wedding dress after leaving Barry at the altar. Um, so how Cheers and
Will and
are
Grace.
similar to this is that um, basically um, Diane and her fiance are about and her husband are about to go on their honeymoon, but then her husband leaves her for his ex-wife. And then with Will and Grace, it's the same kind of setup as the Friends pilot, how um, Grace runs out on her wedding and moves in with her friend Will, who is her friend from college. And some similarities that I noticed in all of these episodes is, of course, the fact that Rachel and Grace are both running away from their weddings. The other things that I noticed are that Will and Chandler both have high paying jobs. Chandler is a data analyst and Will is a lawyer. Both of these shows are set in New York City, and Joey and Jack are both actors.
And like I said, Cheers was set in Boston.
So in James Burrows' memoir, directed by James Burrows, it's mentioned that when the pilot episode of Friends first aired, um, the audience was polled with the question about whether or not they thought Monica was a slut for sleeping with Paul, the wine guy, on the first date. And I think that most of the people in the audience thought that she was a slut. What do you think?
I would agree with you. Sleeping on a first date like that makes you think about it.
So, I originally watched this show when I was a teenager, and at that time, I did not think that Monica was a slut. But I definitely, after rewatching that episode again for the first time since the show originally aired, I can definitely agree with what the originally polled audience said, that Monica was a slut for sleeping with Paul the wine guy on the first date.
And now we want to do some TV character comparisons, starting with Cynthia from Seinfeld.
So we just watched the episode of Seinfeld where Elaine fixes her friend Cynthia, who is played by Maggie Wheeler, up with George, who is played by Jason Alexander. Um so they basically, the date goes pretty well and they actually have sex on the first date, and the condom is defective, so it's kind of determined that Cynthia gets pregnant. Um, as we all know from Friends, Chandler is the one who dates Janice, and she's the one that says, "Oh my god," and has the annoying laugh. To be honest, I really like Cynthia a lot better than Janice. I think she's a lot less in your face. Janice is not, I mean, sometimes she can be a good character, but most of the time she's really annoying. And by the time Chandler and Monica are together, she is annoying about how she tries to insert herself into their relationship, even though they're going to get married.
Mm-hmm.
But Maggie Wheeler is really good in both of these characters, and she was also in the Parent Trap movie with Lindsay Lohan as one of the camp counselors.
And then we also have Julia Roberts in romantic comedies here. And the first one we want to mention is Eat, Pray, Love.
So Eat, Pray, Love is based on Elizabeth Elizabeth Gilbert's memoir, which she wrote when she got divorced from her husband. So she basically went on a self discovery trip where she traveled to Italy, Indonesia, and India. And basically, the book is kind of boring. I DNF'd it halfway through. The thing that makes the movie much more serviceable and enjoyable is the scenery and the cinematography throughout the whole movie, but especially in the scenes in Italy. And those are the scenes I like the most because it makes me want to visit my family.
And
Um,
I also got a little bit of a prey part about in India too. And that's not a country that we would think about going to.
the next movie we wanted to talk about is Notting Hill, which is set in London and it stars Hugh Grant and Julia Roberts. This movie came out in 1999, and we watched it way back in November. And the thing I like best about this movie was the London scenery because I have never been to London, and I also think that Julia Roberts and Hugh Grant had really great chemistry.
And by the way, I have been to London myself before, and I remember going to see Big Ben and Piccadilly Circus and some museums. So I understand the people and other stuff. So it's a very interesting atmosphere, and that's why we have BritBox for streaming services, and we've seen a few television programs here in the United States that they were filmed in England.
Um, the next Julia Roberts thing we wanted to talk about is the one after the Super Bowl, Part 2, which is the second half of the Super Bowl episode of Friends, where Julia Roberts guest stars as Chandler's elementary school classmate who takes him out on a date and then steals his clothes. So, at this time that this episode came out, Julia Roberts was dating Matthew Perry, and you could tell that they were dating because they had such great on-screen chemistry in this episode of Friends. And the first part of this two-part episode was also mentioned in Brooke Shields' book, and she shared a backstage memory about how she slid on the carpet and looked up Matthew Perry's pants and made him laugh. So I thought that was really an interesting insight into what goes on behind the scenes at Friends and filming this Super Bowl episode.
And we've watched a couple other romance comedies this weekend alone. The first one was A Walk to Remember, which came out in 2002. And it stars Mandy Moore as Jamie Sullivan, who is the daughter of the Reverend, where she sings in the choir. And who's the one that played Landon?
Landon is played by Shane West, and he's kind of like in a rebellious crowd, so he is asked to be part of the spring musical that Jamie is in as part of community service for breaking and entering into a place where he wasn't supposed to be. And I really like, so I originally saw this movie for the first time when it was first released. It was one of my favorite movies from when I was in high school. Mandy Moore was also one of my favorite singers aside from Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera, and I think that she had great on-screen chemistry with Shane West. We will get into discussing the ending of this movie in our next video where we talk about alternate endings for Inception and this film. But we gave A Walk to Remember a B and 8.5 out of 10 stars on IMDb.
And I was first introduced to this film by Janine when she first gave me some songs that she burned on a CD when we started dating together. So I was aware of what she did in that film. Plus, I was also able to enjoy her later on when she voiced Rapunzel in Tangled. And one of my favorite songs of all from her is Only Hope.
I love Only Hope too. I sang that in high school choir when I was in 10th grade for our Pops concert.
The other movie that we saw before we
film this video.
before we filmed this video was called Along Came Polly. We just kind of had a really interesting afternoon. We were watching the first third of this film before the ads, and then when we started watching it after the commercials, then we had a fire drill here in this building, and we had to put it on pause because of the storm. There was a sprinkler that where they came a loose screw, so that's why we were evacuated before we resumed watching this.
So I feel like I saw this movie not too long after it first came out in 2004. It stars Jennifer Aniston and Ben Stiller. So this movie starts off with Jennifer Aniston and Deborah Messing um from Smash going on their honeymoon, and she ends up falling in love with the scuba diving instructor on their honeymoon, who is played by Hank Azaria, who is also David the Scientist guy on Friends and the voice of Moe on The Simpsons. So, Ben Stiller's character, Ruben, obviously is distraught, and he reconnects with his middle school classmate, Polly Prince, who's played by Jennifer Aniston. And Jennifer Aniston had really great chemistry with Ben Stiller, especially in the scene when they were salsa dancing. I just saw an electric connection between them in that scene, and I love this whole movie. I think it's one of my favorite Jennifer Aniston movies. In our ranking for movie characters from Friends actors movies, we have placed Polly Prince in B tier, and other Jennifer Aniston characters in this tier are Rachel Green from Friends, Annie Hogarth from The Iron Giant, Beth from He's Just Not That Into You, and that's it. And then I also wanted to talk about a book I just got out of the library that's part of my Gilmore Girls and Friends TBR that I'm really liking right now. It is called Radio Silence, and it's about a YouTube series about these um, characters that are from like some cosplay thing, and I really like it. This book is by the same author of the Heartstopper graphic novels, Alice Oseman, and it's set at a college campus, and I it seems like it's at a school it seems like it's at a school in London, and this connects to Gilmore Girls and the character of Rory because later on in the book the character ends up dropping out of college like Rory does in season 5 when she drops out of Yale. So I am halfway through Radio Silence, and I'm gonna probably give it 4 stars on Goodreads. And I will be talking about more of these books in my next reading progress video for this TBR. And we look forward to the next part of our video, which will be out on March 1st.
So I hope everyone has a safe time this next couple of weeks and stay warm and don't worry, Old Man Winter will not be here forever. You can count on that. Have a good rest of the weekend and a nice President's Day tomorrow if you're watching this right now.